Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Edge on Good News Sports. I'm your host, Glenn Allan. According to recent stats, the annual revenue from pornography is larger than combined revenues, get this, of all professional football, baseball, and basketball franchises in the U.S. It's very clear that many Canadian and American men struggle with sexual purity. What is sexual purity? We read all too often about professional athletes reaping the consequences of sexual temptation. On the show today, we'll discuss this subject that is too often viewed upon as taboo. Let's meet the Edge panel here on Good News Sports. From the Drew Marshall Radio Show, never at a loss to give you his opinion, Drew Marshall. Hey, buddy.
How you doing, Glenn?
Good to see you. Thanks.
I don't think I've ever seen you in a suit.
Well, I'm getting there, you know. He played 14 seasons in the National Hockey League. He is former Toronto Maple Leaf, Mark Osborne. Oz, how are you, buddy?
G-Man, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. This gentleman is one of Canada's finest authors and speakers from Promise Keepers Canada. Please welcome Steve Masterson.
Oh, yeah, Glenn.
Brother, how are you? Once a villain in the seedy world of professional wrestling, now an ordained minister, he is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Hey, Glenn, how are you, buddy?
Good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Guys, a subject that a lot of men don't really want to talk about, and a lot of men perhaps don't even understand. Sexual purity, what is it? Let's start with you, Steve.
Well, it all depends on what we're talking about in terms of, I think you got to start with the most powerful sex organ that we have, and that's our mind and our imagination. And so I think what goes on in our mind and our imagination has a lot to do with sexual purity or impurity.
Ted?
I would think the definition of sexual purity basically is sex between a man and a woman who are married. That's simple.
I mean, that's great. Obviously, I think it has a lot to do with your mind. You mentioned that. I mean, what you look at, what you watch, what you read, stuff on the internet, all that kind of stuff. To me, if you're staying away from that kind of stuff, I believe, and between a man and a woman, certainly your wife only, that would be sexual purity.
Have all of you guys been able to achieve that? Because I can't. I mean, I don't think I've ever achieved this thing called sexual purity. Never. My thought life is atrocious.
We were talking before as we brought up this subject and discussed it before actually putting the program together. We look at 10% of men in North America basically are sex addicts. Another 10% do not have a problem at all, which leaves...
So they don't admit it.
Well, I mean, and then there's 80% who are saying that there's gray areas. When you hear a gray area, what does that mean? Like as the guys are watching the program today, and you're thinking that sexual purity, am I in the, am I going to, is it something that I'm watching on television? Is it something, as athletes, start with Oz. You played in New York. You played with the New York Rangers. I mean, the temptation that faces athletes is unbelievable.
Is it worse with the Rangers than the Leafs?
Yeah, worse than the Rangers. Well, probably in Manhattan with all the things they have to offer you in the late nights and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the places. But again, it's a matter, I think, of having perspective on what you're doing, where you're going, what you're involved in. And if sexual purity is just simply that you can't be sexually pure, I believe you can be, regardless of your thought life. I still think we're natural. We have thoughts. We have a sex drive. We have desires. I mean, that's all God-given. It's now how you act upon those desires. And if I look at a woman, for instance, and next thing you know, do I want to take that a step further? Chances are yes in the mind, but in the heart and what I think God expects of me, I would say no. I wouldn't.
Well, I think there's a big, especially for the average guy out there who, I mean, let's face it. I mean, God created many beautiful things, and one of those is women. Not that they're things.
One of those is women.
Yes.
That's more beautiful than any Niagara Falls or Grand Canyon.
Yes. Okay, but as Ozzy's saying, he says, you see a beautiful woman. It's in my case, the way I was 10 years ago as to the way I am now. What I wanted to do to that person or that woman 10 years ago differs so much today, and I think that's something that really needs to be explored here. I mean, it's true.
It's the difference between love and lust, in my opinion. Love, true love, always seeks to serve the object of your affection, where lust, on the other hand, always seeks to serve self at the expense of everything and everybody. So when you are lusting after a woman, You know, when you're not thinking those pure thoughts, then that's lust. You know, there's a difference between love and lust.
You know, the other side of that coin is we were talking about the porn industry right off the top. A guy named Donnie Pauling is a guy I interviewed on my show, and he is a big porn producer. And just recently, I think in September, he got out of the business. Totally got out of the business.
Wasn't it him and two of the girls?
Yeah,
as
two of
well?
the porn stars, I guess
Yeah.
is whatever you call them. And he says, if you ever see how they film the deal, you wouldn't have lust problems. Like you would not. You just see it in a. It's like what they say about Chinese food. If you ever saw them make it, you never eat it again. You know. So as far as the porn industry is concerned, it's false. It's fantasy. My wife tells me that all the time. Like, give me a break. That's not reality. You know.
Yeah, but in one of those other things, just before, I want to key on this, because there's a stat out there that says 47% of Christian men say that pornography is a problem in their home.
40% of pastors have problems with pornography.
Steve, you want to jump in?
Well, I think the issue is a lot of men have a lot of struggle with false guilt. I call it false guilt because they've never been taught or instructed the difference between a normal, natural sexual response to sexual stimuli that is everywhere in our culture, which, you know, if it even becomes temptation, it's normal, right? And where it crosses the line, like a lot of dads have never instructed their sons on the fact that our sexual drive and our sexual desires and our ability to be stimulated through our eyes, through sexual stimulation, is a good gift from God, and it's good. And we're never told that. We're always told that it's bad, it's dirty, it's you know, you better be quiet, you better not do it.
And what does the media do today? The media today is teaching our kids. The media today, because not enough men have the intestinal fortitude to sit down and have the heart-to-heart with their sons and or daughters,
right,
and tell the truth, because it's I mean, how many times is it the fact that we're watching television or the internet or whatever the case may be, in the signals that are being sent to them, the images that they're seeing, and how, again, the sexual purity we're talking about as men, young boys. I mean, Drew, I mean, you've interviewed these different people before. You have I think it's age 11 is what they say is the first time that a young person, on average now, a young man, a young boy, is seeing a pornographic image. How can we expect them to look at women any other way?
Yeah. Now, you raise excellent points, and I think, but all of us, the reality, I think we're all married here, guys, and we're talking about trying to be faithful not only with our actions but with our thought life, have some integrity. I think I'm brutal at integrity, but I'm trying. I'm really trying. A guy recently told me about when you're looking at other women who you think are hot and smoking, and you're all disappointed with your wife because she's normal. The problem is we're snacking on things, and the junk food diet is killing us. We come home to a normal meal, and it's brutal.
Yeah. I've read where it's at epidemic proportions where there are men who are so into pornography and into a fantasy world, sexually, that they can't perform with their wives because the fantasy that they've built up is just taken over.
Right.
Well, a perfect example is that. Talk about what Vince McMahon, you're talking about. There's no female wrestlers. They're divas now.
Right. Vince would rather have divas than he would, he'd rather have a really good-looking, sexually attractive woman on the show, and she'd be less talented than to have somebody that might be not as feminine or pretty or sexually appealing. That's a better wrestler.
You're technically
because ratings say that good-looking girl is going to up the ratings and it's proven to be true.
Now, you two guys have done the pro sports thing, with the wrestling and the hockey and the traveling and by yourself, and women, we got puck bunnies running around, and I think that's what we used to call them, right?
Yeah,
back in the day.
So. We called them on television anyway.
Yeah, okay.
We called them arena rats.
There you go. Same deal, right?
Right.
So how did you, I don't know, man. How did you survive that stuff? I mean, you didn't in your early because you were
I didn't. I mean,
a scumbag.
We talk about, exactly. One of the biggest.
Yeah. Please don't hold back.
No. Sorry, yeah.
I mean, that was my Achilles heel. I wasn't addicted to drugs. I wasn't addicted to alcohol. I was a social user of both, but those fed my real addiction, and my real addiction was women, and it nearly destroyed my life, and it did destroy my first marriage, and very nearly destroyed my second marriage.
Yeah, I'm probably out of the norm because, I was a single guy. My faith played a huge part in becoming a professional athlete, and I made a decision that I was going to try to live up to a certain standard that I believe God expected of me as a young guy. And I had fears and apprehensions and all that kind of stuff. But along the way, I think I was protected too. You go into a game and you prepare for a game. And it was no different than me with being a young guy with women, being a single guy, that I was determined that I was going to try to be faithful until I became married. And thankfully, it ended up working out that way for me.
So you were a Jesus guy like when you got into the NHL.
That's right.
So you didn't have one of these, I used to be brutal and now I'm, Mother Teresa.
No, different than Ted, that's for sure.
Are you saying that he's Mother Teresa?
No. I'm not saying anything bad about him, man. It's something.
Today on Good News Sports, on the Edge panel, we're talking about sexual purity. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, former Toronto Maple Leaf Mark Osborne, Promise Keeper Canada, Steve Masterson, and Drew Marshall from the Drew Marshall radio program. Today talking about sexual purity, and goodnewsports.ca is our website. We hope that you'll check it out throughout the program here. We're going to take our first time out. Back with more talk, sexual purity, right here on Good News Sports right after this. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Edge on Good News Sports. I'm your host, Glenn Allan. Ted DiBiase, Mark Osborne, Steve Masterson, Drew Marshall today talking about sexual purity.
Why'd you laugh? It's like it's unachievable. Sexual purity.
Basically, I mean, when you look at it, but we're gonna put Ozzy on the hot seat. Oz, is it feasible for a guy to be sexually pure?
I hope so. And again, defines what is not being sexually pure. Does that mean you've had an adulterous relationship? Are you in the internet? Are you at the strip joints?
Yes.
Uh,
Are you reading pornography?
This is
Okay.
I'm not
No, I'm not asking those questions. What I'm saying is, if you're not
You
doing
struggle with that.
those things, I do believe you can be sexually pure because of our natural thoughts. And if you're beating yourself up because you happen to have an attraction to somebody or say, wow, she's beautiful, does that mean that I naturally want to act out on that?
I think the definition of sexual purity gets a bad rap because it implies that you'll never have a sexual thought as a man again. Like your mind and your imagination will just be blank, a blank white slate. And that's not what sexual purity is at all. I mean, Jesus said, he said, he who looks at a woman and lusts after her. He didn't say it was sinful to look at a woman. He said, if you look at her. And I remember one time in Winnipeg, I was at a stoplight and minding my own business, wasn't thinking about sex. And all of a sudden I looked up through the windshield and there was a big billboard of a Hooters girl lying full length out there on a Hooters advertising board. And I mean, she was really hot.
I'm not touching this conversation.
So I had a
You lost
choice.
me,
I
Winnipeg.
mean,
So you had that thought, a thought entered your mind,
Yeah,
but you didn't act upon
well,
it. And
I mean, if you're starving and you look at some bread and you're hungry, something's gonna happen.
How's the marriage, buddy?
Oh, it's good.
But I know what you.
All I'm trying to say is that at that point I had a decision. Do I just enjoy the beauty that God created in this woman and not take it to the next level, which would turn into lust? I had a choice, and I made a choice, and I didn't make that choice to cross the line.
Right, and
Why
I did cross that line quite often. I mean, that was the burden in my life. That was the sin in my life. Dr. Ed Cole made a statement one time, and he made this analogy, and it pierced my heart. He put it in terms of a married couple had just been married. They go on the honeymoon. They're standing on the balcony. The sun's going down, and he says, when you can look into your spouse's eyes and say, God has given me a gift that I can only give to one person one time in a lifetime, my virginity, and today I give it to you. It makes the union between a man and a woman unique to one another. That broke my heart because I realized that I had failed, but it also made me understand why it was meant to be that way.
What about flirting?
Well,
Talk about where we stand as flirting. I mean, it's I don't know about you, but if somebody goes by, if somebody comes by, you get a little bit of attention paid to you, and it's kind of like,
Feels
Yeah,
good, baby.
yeah, you still
Feels
got it.
good. I still got
It
it.
depends on the attitude of your heart.
yeah.
I mean, if it's done in fun, like if you had fun, and if it was like a sister, somebody that's just very close to you like that, I don't think there's
Dude,
any.
I don't flirt with my sister.
No. That wasn't where I was going with that.
Okay, that's a different topic, man.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're from the South and everything, but
Oh, wait a
that's
minute.
wrong. Hey, listen, the flirting scenario for me, I think we have to do it individually. I don't think we can do a carte blanche thing, but for me, I gotta watch it. I really do, because I'm a yapper and I'm a listener, and there's a lot of guys suck at listening. I happen to be a fairly decent listener. When I was pastoring, I think a lot of pastors can get into trouble, because that's what they get paid to do, is be good listeners in these counseling sessions and stuff. And then we get all these, weird stories coming out of churches all over the world.
And
So-
we're also talking. We're sitting here as married men. What about a single guy? What do you say to a single guy who's trying to
married?
find? Pardon?
Get married?
What do you say to a single guy who's a single adult? Here's a male out there looking to find that perfect mate, if you will, and there's flirtation. There's this.
But hold on, if you're single, you can flirt. Why can't you flirt when you're single? You saying that's bad?
No, I'm asking.
Well, how are you gonna meet somebody if you don't start flirting? If you're a
Yeah.
single guy, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it depends on again. I mean, the way we're wired. We're wired that way. We're wired to be attracted to a woman, and oftentimes the things that attract us first is not her intellect. It's how good looking she is. That's and it's not bad to be attracted to somebody like that, because it is the way we're wired, and we shouldn't feel guilty if we are.
But married men shouldn't flirt. Dead set, right? I mean, there's guys who are real kind of fun and vivacious and stuff, and kind of the village idiot or class clown. Not that I've met anybody
and
like
what
that,
does it
but-
mean to flirt? Like, what's
Funny
your
that you come
purpose
up with
behind?
that.
What's your purpose behind doing what you're doing?
What's the
Exactly,
motive?
exactly.
What's the
Yeah,
motive
right,
behind
right,
it?
right,
If it's having fun and you're goofing around, which we like to do, and especially you like to do, I mean, then I would say it would probably be appropriate. But if then the motivation behind it is to perhaps take it a step further, and you're looking to do that again the next time, then you know what? You better recognize that perhaps you're stepping over the boundary.
If you're getting fed from that stuff, if that's your source of, I don't know, whatever.
Well, it's like going to the porn and stuff like that. Once you start getting fed, I mean that's difficult. I wouldn't say hard. It's difficult.
Well, as a married man, a man can flirt with his eyes in terms of what he's looking at. For example, my wife loves to watch football, and most football ads are beer ads, and on those beer ads, they have a lot of provocative, sexualized images there. And so one of the things I do to not flirt with that image and that picture, I flip the channels during and my wife has told me she appreciates that. Like, she knows how I'm wired. She knows what those images do to me. And so...
So you turn it to The Price is Right.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Well, I know what you're talking about. I mean, and again, it's like when I travel now. I've been a minister for 6 years, but I still travel. I stay in hotels. Most hotels you go to now, you go to the hotel room and you know that they have pay movies, and you know that they have X-rated pay movies. As I check into that hotel, not because I have the desire to, but as a safeguard, I tell them as soon as I check in, I said, delete that from my television, because I know I'm not going to get up there at 11 o'clock at night and call them back and go, hey, put the adult movies back on. But it's just a way of doing what you're saying is running from the temptation.
Okay, this kind of takes me into the next phase of this, and this is one that a lot of people don't really want to get into, and especially in the church and what have you. You get into fantasizing, masturbation. It doesn't hurt anybody, or does it?
Yeah, self-love. I mean, I had a huge conversation with my son about this, because it's an addiction. It's an addictive thing. It's like there's some kind of, I'm not a science major or anything, but some kind of chemical goes through your body and turns your crank, and kind of you need it later. And we all medicate ourselves with everything. Some people do it with shopping. Some people will do it with TV. And this is just another way to medicate our lives, this masturbation deal.
Well, I've counseled guys that the attitude is, I'm not going to cheat on my girlfriend. I'm not going to cheat on my wife. I'm not going to actually go that. I'm not going to flirt with any other women. But, by fantasizing over a Playboy magazine and masturbating, I'm not really hurting anybody but myself. But you are. You're doing the same thing as if you actually went and had an affair.
See, God made it very clear that the sexual expression is to be between one man and one woman in the covenant of marriage. And so when a married man or a single man is fantasizing and masturbating, that's the most self-centered, selfish act that he can engage in, because it's not relational. It's simply self-satisfying pleasure that he gives to himself. And
Back to the definition of lust.
that's right.
You know, seeking to serve self at the expense of everybody.
Okay, well, talking about the lust thing.
Really
sir-
quick, 'cause I
okay,
wanna get
well,
someone else.
Just, can you lust after your own wife? You're married, she's hot. Is that okay to do that? Is that a bad thing? Anybody got an answer? I've never had a straight answer in that
I
one.
don't think you have to call it lust. I think you just call it erotic. I mean, read the Song of Songs in the Bible. I mean, if that doesn't get your crank going, nothing will.
There you go.
There you go.
I want to spin this.
Need to go to a break now.
Yeah. Water, please.
I think you can, but I do think you can, you know, you can get a frame of mind to where your wife becomes a sex object, and it's
Yeah, that's not
then
good.
it's lust and it's not love.
Yeah.
Okay,
gonna be different
let
for
me ask
everybody
you this
too,
then, guys. Let me ask you this, especially in the church today, because there are some things in the church that we're missing, and one of the barriers, if you will, is stigma. And
Stigmata?
Stigma.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Realize that there's a problem here, and we're still in the church. Some churches, I'm not going to paint them all with the same brush. However, it's a country club attitude where you have to fit in, you have to do this, you have to do that. How can I come forward and ask for help in under a minute? How do we break that stigma to make it okay for guys to say, you know what, pastor, you know what, senior pastor, I have a problem, I need help.
But the pastor's doing it first, so we don't have Ted Haggard scenarios. You think about it. Here's a guy who what's the worst place in the world to come forward? We're talking about heterosexual issues here. The reality is there's homosexual temptation and lust and all that kind of a deal too. What's the worst place in the world to be able to come forward to say, I'm struggling with homosexuality? The flippin' church is the worst place in the world. Now you got a pastor who struggles with it. He's dead meat. He can't come out with that stuff.
Every time I speak to 50 or 500 men about sexual purity, and first you do some solid biblical teaching on it, but then you make yourself vulnerable. And when you make yourself vulnerable in front of all the men, they begin to feel safe. And when a man feels safe in the church,
Yep.
he'll talk about it.
Guys, thanks very much.
Glenn,
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
you. You bet.
Thank you very much.